Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with JP, who is behind the newsletter Tropical Podcasting, which is a Spanish language newsletter, I believe, JP.
That is true. Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you for speaking with me today. This is fun. We are going to get to a surprise question later from a podcaster who is really fascinated with the work that you're doing, and you might be surprised by who the person is that sent the question in. I don't know.
Oh, cool.
So your podcasting history, then you've worked for Blue Wire Podcast, Podchaser. I mean, these are all companies that everybody should know in the industry. Blue Wire Podcast, Podchaser, and Evergreen Podcast. What was your introduction to podcasting, and were you a lover of podcasts before getting involved in the industry, or was it the other way around?
Yes, I was very much a lover and a listener of podcasts before that. I come from a radio family, so radio was always on. AM radio was always like talk radio was always on in my house, and I did a little bit of radio before jumping into podcasting as well. So yeah, like the audio and the spoken word has always been like I've always had a great connection to it. And I got introduced to podcasts with the iPhone. I got my first iPhone around 2009. I found the app and I was like, this is amazing. Like you're telling me like I have all this free content that I can listen to whenever. And at one point I was without a car. So I had to take a lot of public transportation, take the train, like we were talking earlier, take the train and take the bus and stuff. And I was just like, it was like an hour away. And I needed something to listen to. So that's when the second season of Serial came out.
Yes.
So I was very into that. I was listening to a lot of that. I was listening to also a lot of Welcome to Night Vale, and completely blew my mind. This whole aspect of the audio fiction and the storytelling that they were doing on that show. And around that time, I was looking for a very specific podcast. I used to work for a TV channel here in Puerto Rico, doing the social media for the channel. And the channel has a sister channel that is all about sports. So it's all as a completely a sports channel. So I was looking for some podcast about social media, professionals in social media and in sports, and that was in Spanish, of course. And since I found one. It was from Spain, but it wasn't. It had been on hiatus for a long time. So I said I should make it. So that was my first podcast. It's called Click Deportes Podcast back in 2016. And after that, I followed this pipeline that I believe a lot of us in the podcasting industry have, and I think even it should be even bigger pipeline of creator to work in the industry, like you said, with the companies like Blue Wire and Podchaser. And I've done different things. With Blue Wire, I was a producer. With Podchaser, I was doing something else, and with Evergreen, I'm doing something else. So there's been a lot of different avenues that I've covered. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think that pipeline it should be bigger. More companies should be hiring people like us that have created podcasts and have that experience to work in their teams.
What you were saying then is interesting, because if you think about it, when you get involved in podcasting, it's almost like you have to dip your toe into every different area of the water, essentially. So, I mean, pulling the curtain away, I'm introducing this show. I write the notes, which everybody knows. So I'm producing it, I'm presenting it, I do the editing most of the time as well. And there's these other aspects to it, which in any other industry, even the radio, for instance, and television and any other media, and even in newspapers, each person would have a different role, and you would very rarely find somebody going from one role in media to another, but podcasting is completely different, where the independence of it all lends itself to you learning all these different aspects of it.
Absolutely, you're totally right, and I think that's something that's very unique to, obviously, to the podcasting industry, and I guess to the creator industry as a whole. Because if you're a content creator, say on YouTube or any other platform, then you're doing that sort of thing. And it's amazing with my work in Evergreen. Obviously, I work with a lot of creators every single day, and you get the whole spectrum of the people like you and like me who do absolutely everything from the idea all the way to the distribution. And midpoint is the creation of the whole thing. And then you have other people that have their teams and they just show up and talk, and somebody else takes care of that. And some other people that do the whole thing, but they all obviously one part more. Like some people like to produce a little bit more than actually speaking, or speaking more than producing, or editing more than. So it's very interesting the way that podcasting encompasses all of these things. And like you said, if you want to do it, you either get some help or you're gonna have to do everything. To be honest with you, editing is not my favorite thing. Like that, like if I could give that to somebody else to do when I'm creating my shows, it would be better. But at the same time, I'm very aware of what I put out and what should I cut out and everything. So it's a balance of, I could give it to somebody and they could do a great job, or they might not, and then I have to still do it anyway. So, but yeah, like there's so many of us that have to like pretty much be the jack of all trades basically, and learn so many different skills that in the end are obviously beneficial for anything really.
Absolutely. So you've been involved in the industry for that long and been worked for those different companies. How did the transition? How did you transition then from that to this incredible newsletter that you've produced?
Right. So one of my goals has always been to help people, specifically to try to professionalize podcasting here locally in the island of Puerto Rico. My personal mission, of course, was to go from working in that past job that I had in the TV channel to becoming a professional in the podcasting industry, like getting different jobs, not only just as a producer, as a podcaster, but also more involved in the business side of the industry. And I decided to, that I wanted to help other people do that, because like I mentioned, that pipeline of creators that can also find a regular 9 to 5 job, like a good,
Yeah.
and that comes also from my work in sports social media, because it's very similar there. So you have a lot of people that say, oh, I want to work in sports, or I want to be involved in sports. And they think, the first thing that they think is that I need to be an athlete. I need to be a basketball player. I need to be a football player. And not necessarily. You have these huge organizations. Teams are huge organizations, corporations that have absolutely everything from security, physical security, IT, cybersecurity, all these other things, to the more creative side. So that started in those early years when I was doing that work, and it translated to podcasting, where I wanted to do the same. If you can be a podcaster and also find a job in the podcasting industry that can pay the bills and do
Yeah.
everything that you need, while also having time or space to create something that you're proud of, something that you're happy with, or something that you do with friends. So that's that is the way of the transition to the newsletter. I want to help people. I want to move. I mean, I want also people to learn like what's going on in the industry.
Yeah.
So it's not just, they're not siloed, or they're not like, I'm doing my own thing. Whereas it's like there's this whole community around here that can help you and that can connect you to other opportunities. Back in 2018, I created a meetup, so like a local podcasters meetup, and that was amazing. I had like almost 25 people show up, a bunch of different shows, a bunch of shows actually created like connections, and that started that idea of creating the community. And I've done many other meetups after that. And I was just thinking, when started the idea of the newsletter has been in my mind for a long time, really. And but at one point I was like, all right, I really need to do this. I really need to get it done. And I've always had this thing of always having a project, like always
Yeah.
having something creative to do. And I was missing that after some time. And I decided, let's give the newsletter a try. I can help with people to be informed and know what's going on in the world, what's going on in the industry, the latest tips, the latest strategies, like the changes. Because obviously, as we both know, and most of the people listening to this show have to know that the industry is constantly changing and the platforms release different things constantly. So I wanted to give something back like that, and also to help people again. You use that pipeline of people are like that are in the podcasting, but may be interested in the more professional side of it. This is here is basically a summary of what's going on. And if you want to be in the industry, then you should be able to know what's going on with video, what's going on with the major moves and deals that are going on. So that is the idea of the newsletter. It's just a way of helping people to either stay up to date so that they can keep doing their podcast the way they're doing it, or be better at their podcast. And also people that are adjacent to the podcasting industry, marketing, publicity, all these other people. So they have to know as well, is there a lot of marketing opportunities? Is there a lot of ad opportunities in the podcasting industry? They should be able to know that. So the newsletter is also a way for them to just be on the know and stay up to date with those type of news.
Well, I'm guessing that in some way, I mean, another thing about podcasting is that it's easy to get to have a communication between yourself and these podcast industry people, these people in charge, or the people who you contact through them anyway, not necessarily the CEO, but the people that work for these podcasts. So for yourself, I'm guessing that's a good thing, because essentially that means that you can provide this service for all people with the assistance, I'm guessing, from sponsorship or from advertising or money that you're probably getting from these businesses. Maybe, I don't know.
Right now I'm not monetizing that much, but
Okay.
yes, I do. I learned so much, obviously, from my peers and my supervisors, and they're people that are a lot smarter than I am, and they make me want to be a better professional in the podcasting industry and to want to stay up to date with these things and learn new skills. Like, out of all the things, I would say that the ad side of podcasting is probably my weakest. Is the one that I don't have as much experience, ads and sales and that sort of thing. But in the production side, obviously, like I have more experience in that, and I feel more comfortable with it. So I do use that opportunity too, and not only with the people that I work with, but just people that I engage with on LinkedIn and Blue Sky and social media. It's just learning about the way that they speak about their craft and about their work. I think that's something that's really helped me. And being able that is one of the great things of social media, and obviously to listening to the podcast and reading their newsletters, is that you get a sense of how that person is and how that person thinks, and you get a sense of like their opinions and which side, when something comes up, you might be able to start almost guessing which side this person is going to take, or which area they're going to focus. So yeah, I feel like I use a lot of the knowledge that I share, that I can take from these people, and try to translate that into the newsletter and to the work that I do.
Okay. This is as good a time as any, and I better ask the question before I forget to ask. So here we go. I've had a question in for you from Ariel Nissenblatt from Feedback with Earbuds, and or from the Earbuds Podcasting Collective, and she said to ask you. She said, "So, where would you like to see tropical podcasting going to in the future? Where do you see it going from where you are now?"
I mean, anything closer to anything that Ariel does, because she's amazing. Like
Is
everything that she touches is just so good, and I'm actually surprised that had that question, and I'm very grateful for it. But I mean, where I would, you know, I think we think about numbers and whatever. Oh, I would like to have 10,000 subscribers or something like that. I don't. I That would be great. Like that, those numbers obviously would be amazing. What I would like tropical podcasting is to be known and considered as a resource for all these other podcasting companies or adjacent to the podcasting industry, to be like, oh, you're starting this job. These are the things that you need to consume, like this type of content. You need to listen to this podcast, you need to listen to whatever, and also you should read this newsletter. Like you should stay up to date with what this newsletter talks about, because they will give you a summary, a weekly summary of what's going on in the industry, so that you are better prepared, for your job. I think that would be like the main thing that I think that would be like mission success. Having Tropical Podcasting be considered like that, be considered like just this podcasting resource. I think that would be pretty cool.
But the cool thing there with that question is, I mean, I'm just going to go to a bit of a tangent here, is the fact that that's how the community of the podcasting world is, that you get questions sent in by these people like Ariel, who, I mean, a lot of us are in, I mean, she should probably find this really embarrassing for us to say this, but a lot of us are in awe, in a sense, of how good she is at what she does with the work, and the fact that she's gone almost in a similar way from being somebody who loves podcasting, and she's built herself up to where she is now in the industry. And a lot of us just think of her as just this person who's almost one of those people that we all look up to as an incredible podcaster, and somebody that we trust to give us the information and to help with these things as well.
No, absolutely. And I think obviously that's a testament to her work, her hard work, and just staying consistent, staying out there. I mean, I remember years ago first following her on social media, and just like seeing that her journey. And you're absolutely right. She is trusted. Like whenever Ariel says something, like you want to listen, you want to watch or listen to what she does. You want to follow all of her content. So yeah, and I think that the community has also shown her that love of always of considering her a trusted voice, along with so many other voices out there that I think the podcasting community says, right, if this person says something, that I'm gonna listen to. So yeah, and to be able to have that connection also in like you mentioned, in the podcasting industry, I just think it's amazing.
Yep. I'm going to shout out some names now, if you want to add some to it as well. James Cridland, Brian Barletta, Tom Webster, Danny Brown. Oh, there's Chris, who makes that podcast series about podcasting. I can't remember his name. There's also the School of Podcasting. There are a lot of people who both of us know of and are friends with online, virtually, or sometimes in cases for real as well in real life. But there's all these people that we're mentioning here that we will trust to give us the information correctly. And if you want the information, that's where to go to, these resources.
No, yeah, and I mean, and those names are heavy hitters. And you have also Elsie Escobar, you have Lauren from Think Media, who also works a lot with Ariel. Like those people are just, again, if you want to be informed and you want to take the work of podcasting seriously, then you want to listen to those people, to those names that you mentioned, because they've proven time and time again with their experience. Elsie Escobar is Hall of Famer podcaster. Tom Webster is about to be a Hall of Famer. So, and obviously Ariel and James and Danny and all these other people, at some point they'll get there too, because they've been consistent. They've been at this for a long time, consistently putting like great content and helping people, which I think is like the main thing. It's just like helping people create their shows or find their ways, or realizing that what they're doing might not be working, but they could work in a different area or in a different way. I just think that is the key to just being accessible and sharing that knowledge that they have, and just helping move the industry along.
I see you going that way with what you're doing with Tropical Podcasting, because you are doing virtually the same thing of offering this advice to people, good advice to people, suggestions to people, the things that they can use, technology, and then just these things. But also you've got the niche that you're doing it in Spanish language as well, so helping with that as well. So I see you as being in the same arena as those people.
I mean, that is amazing to hear that. Thank you for that. but I do look up to those people. Yeah, like I do look up to them and the work that they do and try to imitate that or try to take what they do and bring it into my own thing. Obviously, I'm not trying to copy what they're doing, but there is, if you look at tropical podcasting and also the adjacent, the companion what's happening in podcasting, there are elements of the people that we've talked about, because I just see, obviously it's working, people trust them, and I want to take a little bit of that and add some of my own. It would be great, like I said, it would be great to be considered around those people. I'm not the only one doing it in Spanish. There's also other podcasters out there that are, or people that are doing the sort of thing that I'm doing as well. But again, it would be great to try to to be in that conversation and to try to replicate a little bit of the work that they do for thousands of people in English, to try to move that also to the Spanish language audience and
Absolutely.
workers.
I mean that's a wish of mine personally, because okay, so I'm speaking in English, but I hope for this in all languages like Spanish, in French, in Italian, in all of these languages, because all these people, their first languages that aren't all English, they're not all Spanish, they're not all this language. So I would like it to be spread across all of these different languages and these different cultures in the world.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of also the open RSS and the open audio, is that it can go out wherever, and then you can, and with all these different services that we have now, you can have your voice cloned and it speaks all of a sudden it's in French, or but it's still your voice, and that is just another a huge audience that you can reach out to, and I think that is amazing too. Like you don't have to stay in this lane because of the language. You can always be able to reach out and expand.
Absolutely. So podcasting first steps is the next thing that I've got on the list of bullet points. What I mean by that is, if you met up with somebody who was thinking of podcasting for the first time, what would you suggest to them as their first steps, or the steps that they could make to start in the world of podcast?
I think writing down your idea and being clear about your idea is one thing. What do you want to talk about? And then the other thing is, who is this for? What is the audience? Like, what are you going to, who do you want to reach? And then the other thing that I also, when people have asked me that question, one of the first things that I also like to remind them is to define success.
Yeah.
Because you want to know, do you want to make money? Do you want to make leads for your business? Do you want to reach 1,000 people? Do you want to reach 100 people? It's so important, because a lot of people start their podcast and they're like, oh, it's out there and it's reaching whoever. Then they realize they might be a one person band and they're doing everything that we were talking earlier. And then they realize this is a lot and I'm not seeing the numbers that I thought and whatever. So it's very important to define that, to define what success is going to look like, because it's going to look different to everybody. And that is the thing that is going to keep you motivated. Because if you don't have that, and then you're doing a lot of stuff and maybe you don't like editing that much, but you dread it, but you have to do it. And then you're looking at your downloads as, oh, this is not great. Then you're going to get, it's not going to be great. You're going to get demotivated, and it's just going to become a chore then, and you're going to start hating doing it. So if you have your success defined and you're saying, I want to reach this audience, I don't care if it's not a big audience, but it's like my niche, and I want to be able to like reach them and have those people listen to the episode and connect to the podcast and connect with me and create a community. That is success also. And that can be what keeps you going, like to know that people are engaging with your content. That is enough. So I think that's very important. Having a good idea, defining who that idea is for, who you want to reach, and then how success looks like.
So I don't know why I didn't ask this before that one early. So yeah, I mean, going with that, I would agree with that. That I mean, it's something that everybody says basically, that when you start in podcasting as an independent podcaster, mostly, you're not going to expect those large numbers of the Rogans or anything like that. You will not get those numbers as an independent podcaster, at least not at the beginning anyway, or the Smartlesses, or which are all great shows, but you won't go there. So you've got to like temper, in essence, your expectation. And essentially, I think that when you start, don't get down by the amount of numbers, but look at more like, I think, to keep positivity, you look at the people that are staying there, essentially, and are constant listeners and followers of your show, essentially, because they're the people. And it's, hold on, I might not have these numbers, but the numbers that I have got, they are solid numbers that are coming back and are constantly listening. And that is a positive to take from it and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And also keeping that front of mind helps you stay consistent, because you know that you're reaching someone, that you're reaching, it might be a small group, but those people really like your content or depend on your content. Maybe you're giving some information that's very important to them and to whatever they do. So they are expecting your content. They're expecting next week, I know that I'm going to have that show and it's going to be a topic that I'm going to enjoy. So that can help you with the motivation and to stay consistent. And if you stay consistent, then obviously you can then reach more people and create obviously authenticity on the show and some sort of loyalty from the people. And that helps growth. The thing is that it takes time. It takes a long time. We were talking about just now about people like Ariel and Lauren and James, like they've been doing it for a long time. And a lot of people follow them, but it's because they've stayed consistent. So that is I think that is a key. But how they always say, when you write or when you create a podcast, you always like you do it for one person. Like you think about this one person. I do that. Like I think about specifically one person when I'm writing Tropical Podcasting, because this person, I know that every Thursday morning or afternoon, she's gonna be on Instagram saying, "Oh, like we're sharing the content of Tropical Podcasting." So when I'm thinking about her, I'm thinking about her topics on her podcast and what she would like to achieve. And that's when I'm writing, I'm thinking about, because obviously, like her, there's a bunch of other people, a bunch of other subscribers that are depending on the content that I share. So I think that helps with the consistency and to keep motivated, because if you're just reaching to one person, and we've heard this stories of people that are like, "Oh, I'm thinking about quitting," or whatever, and then they get like this one DM or one email or one review that say, "Oh, the last episode changed my life," or "It really helped me understand this problem," or whatever. And that is the catalyst to, no, I'm gonna stay doing this. I'm gonna keep doing this, and I'm gonna, because if I help this one person, I can help more. So it's, again, checking the how success looks. Might be that, might be just be like, I want one person to write me a good review or send me an email saying, "This is great. This is really helping me." That might be enough.
So you're putting together the newsletter, and we'll get to the structure in a minute and how you structure it. But the items that you place into the newsletter, how do you choose the topics that you're going to put in the newsletter and go into in detail, but also in the interviewing sections where you interview podcasters or people in the industry? How do you choose those people and go about the interviewing of those people?
Yeah. So the structure, I try to focus a lot on obviously the Hispanic area, Hispanic language, or what podcasting, or what's happening in podcasting in the Spanish speaking languages, Spanish speaking countries. I'm sorry. So that is like one of the first things that I look for. If there's something specific, like if Spotify did something specific in Spain or in Mexico or in Argentina, because obviously those are some of the biggest countries that they operate out of, then I want to share that, because obviously I know that there's audience from those countries that are reading, and I want to keep them in the loop, and also keep other people in the loop and saying, maybe they're like, "Oh, that would be cool. What's happening in Mexico? That would be cool if it was happening here, in, I don't know, in Peru, for example." So just to keep them aware of what's going on. And the other thing that I try to do is just, I look a little bit more in terms of the news and of what's going on that week. I try to keep it broad, like the big things. Like if there are any reports If there are any studies or case studies or whatever, or surveys, that I try to share that. I usually, especially if it's done in the United States, which the majority of surveys and the research is done, they include the Latino audience or Spanish speaking. So I try to take the parts of those surveys or whatever
Yeah.
that speak directly to that audience, but also overall. It might be one thing, so that might be like one data point in Latino listening. So I might start with that, but then I'll share the rest of the stuff, because obviously, at least within the United States, the Latino community is so ingrained with the rest of the community. So it's good to obviously know like what the audience is doing as a whole. And with there are other tips and strategies and whatever, I try to take the best ones and the ones that are most interesting, and also not to repeat what I'm doing. So if last week I told you here are the best tips to edit your episode, for example, then I'm not gonna repeat that. I try to change. Obviously, depending on what I find on that week, which is there's always so much going on. So there's always so many people sharing great knowledge that there's always something to pick. And in terms of interviewing, I try to answer a question or solve a problem, really. Or show some sort of expertise. One of the first editions of the newsletter, we were talking about like the importance of a cover art and how a good cover art calls attention and hooks somebody and makes somebody click on your episode, on your podcast, and want to listen. And there was a great case study about somebody that completely changed the cover art and had a huge boost in downloads. I believe Jeremy Enns, I think, who shared it. And so then I went to two friends that are designers, like graphic designers, and I asked them, I was like, one has a podcast and the other one doesn't, but has worked on cover arts for other podcasts as well as other brands. And I asked them, what makes a good cover art? What are your thoughts? What should I be thinking about if I want to create one, or if I want to rebrand? What should I do? And so that's where I was trying to go. Try to answer a question or solve a problem, or give this sort of more expert take on one of these issues that affect casters daily.
So, so then how do you structure how the newsletter is? Is there a certain way that you do it so you have the heading and then you have one subject and then another, or does it change each time as to where each type of item is? With a newspaper, for instance, you'll have the headline, and then you'll have the more recent news stories, and the news stories will be less important as you go through a newspaper. I don't really like saying less important, because all news in the podcasting world is important. But what do you look at when you're structuring the actual design of the newsletter as to where pieces are?
In terms of structure, is always the top will be what's going on. So the most recent news is usually about 3 or 4. I try to put a minimum of 4 entries in there, but 3. And then after that is tips, tricks, and strategies.
Yeah.
So that's where I divide them. I try to, as much as I can, to find a common thread. So if there is a survey about audience growth or whatever that came out that week, I share that. And then if I also find tips on how to grow an audience, or grow a specific audience, or grow a community, then I'll be like, this is what, and at the bottom, and later on we're going to talk about how to do it, like tips on how to do it. And I try to, and that also goes into the headline, because obviously the headline is very important, because that's what people see first, and that's why it's gonna attract, whether it's answering a question or piquing their interest. So that's very important. So I always try to find a common thread. I've been fairly successful in that, and try to make one newsletter, one edition of the newsletter. Obviously, it's different things from all different sources, but almost like a common thread where you can see where everything is going. And obviously, video is like the biggest thing right now. And almost every day, every story is about video. But I don't want to, I try not to then just overload with video, because I know there's a lot of people that don't do video or can't do video, or for whatever reason. So I try to like mold it in a way of I could still talk about video, but then it'll be like lower in the order of the entries. And yeah, so there are sometimes I break down some of the stuff. If it's like a long report, I try to break down the most important parts of it, or just a couple of points, and obviously share the source. So that if you want to read more, then you can go over here. The issue, obviously, since I'm translating a lot of these reports and surveys or whatever from English to Spanish, then I have to go a little bit deeper and get at least enough information for the person to read it off their phone or off their tablet and be like, oh, that's cool. At least find themselves to have learned something, and some tips, some bits from these surveys or these different type of content, so that they can be like, oh, okay, that's cool. And if they want to read more, then, or if they really want to dive deep into this report, then they can the source will always be there, so they can do that.
So what we've got next is where to go for advice. Yeah, I think we've already touched on this in a sense, because me and yourself were discussing certain people that we respect and treat with regard, and these people that we know that we can trust in. So I think that's essentially is that. But also on the other side is, in essence, it's almost, I think we're both saying here that the good thing about podcasting is that it is such an open world where everybody is available to everybody. And for the most part, it's a friendly media to be in, where there isn't so much competition, which is it's the strangest thing. So you can have 3 or 4, well, you can have so many hundred podcasts about the Beatles, and they all seem to get on with each other. There's none of that. So essentially, what I was going to ask is, where do you suggest people going for advice? I'm answering the question myself here, which is just go out there and talk to fellow podcasters, because they will always give advice to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the great things about podcasting and the community that it creates. Because if you're starting, everybody else was there at that point, and everybody had the same questions of what microphone should I use, what hosting should I use, all of these like questions that always come up in Facebook groups or in the conferences or whatever. We've all been through that. Like, we've all asked like what those questions and answer those questions ourselves. So there's a lot of knowledge out there. There's a lot of options as well. So there's no one size fits all, basically.
Yeah.
It's always this thing of what, like the most common answer to questions in podcasting is it depends. It depends. It depends on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Do you have a show that is it just you? Is it 4 people? Are you all in one room? Is everybody virtual? Is half of you virtual? So it depends. But yeah, so since it depends, there's a bunch of people out there that have already answered that question for themselves or for other people, and they're willing to help you. And this was something that was super great when I did the meetups that I mentioned some years ago here in Puerto Rico, especially the first one, because that was like the biggest one where a bunch of people showed up. There's a good picture, actually. Somebody took a picture of the table that we were sitting. So this long table. Mine is 5 or 6 tables together. So it's like this long table with people, facing each other. And in that exact moment, there was like 15 people, and a bunch of them are on their phone. And somebody was like dismissive, was like, "Oh, everybody's on their phone. No one's having a conversation." And I was like, "No, they're not on their phone or what, just scrolling social media. They're subscribing to like other the shows of the people around them, because they didn't. They're like, oh, follow my show, and which is your show?" And so they're like on the different listening apps, finding these shows and creating this great community. I know of at least 2 shows that did not crossovers, but had relations where they were like, I can cross promote on your show, or you can be on my show, or we can talk about the same. It's like you mentioned, there's 100 Beatles podcasts, but if you let them, they'll make one episode where everybody's there. If that was possible, they'll do it, and they'll be super happy to do it, because there's so many different perspectives and experiences with everything, and everybody's got a different story to tell. So I think that is a great point. And to anybody that's listening and having these questions, just go out there and find the community. Like in your area, there's a local area in your state, in your city, or wherever you live, there must be some sort of group meetup or weekly meetup or breakfast or lunches or whatever, of podcasters just like you. And I would go as far as suggesting that if you are in a city or in a state or whatever that doesn't have this, then go ahead and create it. Put yourself out there and be like, I'm a podcaster and I want to talk to people. So, come join me at this place or whatever. And you don't have to make it formal. All the meetups that I've done, they've never been formal. I mean, I've gone out of my way to tell people this is not going to be a talk. There's no speaker. There's no nothing. It's just here, this place. We're going to come over here. We're going to drink beer. We're going to have fun, talk. That's it. We're going to spend here our time just having conversations. There's no structure. There's no ticket. There's none of that, because that just opens it up to sorry, it opens it up to other people. It opens it up to other people so they can be more welcome. And because they might be like, I don't want to go to a conference or whatever, but when you say, hey, it's just us, we're just going to be here drinking beer, having fun. And so that makes it a bit more accessible. So if you don't have it, it's with podcasts. If you looking for a podcast and it doesn't exist, you go out and create it. Do the same thing with your community. So you can get a group together, and it could be 5 of you, but the next one, it'll be 10, it'll be 15, and it'll grow. So, and everybody will benefit from that.
Yep, absolutely. So what podcast do you like to listen to yourself?
Oh man, that is a loaded question. So
You're going to give a long list like I would.
the things that there was a time where I actually was not listening to that many. And then recently I changed into Pocket Cast. I'm gonna advertise the app, but I changed to their paid plan. And that has completely changed the way I listen to it, because now I can create folders and I'm like, so podcast about podcasts, and it's full. It's got like 20 shows in there, and history or audio or in Spanish or in sports. So there's so many that I'm listening to. But I mean, obviously, listen to Pod News daily. I listen a lot to the Captivated one. What's around in podcasting with Mark and Danny? I forgot.
Mark and Danny, yeah. I can't remember the name now.
No, we can't. I mean,
but while you're looking, there's also Sounds Profitable as well, of course.
Sounds Profitable, yeah.
Yeah.
That's always great in and around podcasting.
Yeah,
in and around podcasting. One that's newish that I really enjoyed is Podcast Perspectives.
Yeah.
I really like that one. The conversations that are going on there. There's a long list of podcasts about podcasts that I listen to. I don't want to get into to all of them, but there another one that I've discovered very recently with this journey into the newsletter business and how to grow it and everything. I discovered Creator Spotlight. And that is specifically, they talk to a lot of creators, so newsletter operators, YouTubers, but I try to focus on the episodes that are either about podcasters or about newsletter operators, because obviously that's where I overlap. And it's fantastic because you get so much great content and so many great insights from people some people are making millions of dollars in with their newsletters, and some that are just making a little bit, but enough they're very happy with. And the sort of local newsletters versus like open world newsletters, it's amazing. And with other unrelated to that, other shows that I'm listening to a lot is, I don't know, I want to give a shout out to my company here, Evergreen, but it's Conflicted. Conflicted is in the history podcast, and I really like it. The cadence, the way that the stories are told. There are big stories. There was a story about the Great Depression and how the crash of the 1930s and how that happened. But it really goes back into like why it started, and it goes back years before, and it tells great stories. So if you're a history nerd like I am, then that's something that you can check out. And another one that I've been listening recently, it was 30 Minutes to the Moon by the BBC, the science group from them, because I know that they recently released one series about the space shuttle, but that's like season 3. So how did I go back and listen to 30 Minutes to the Moon? I know there's another one. I believe that it's about Apollo 13, and then you have the one for the space shuttle. So I'm taking it in order basically.
I've been doing a lot more listening of BBC Sounds products lately, actually, like the Limelight series. I've been listening to that a lot, and what else, and some other items as well. Shows about podcasting. Have you come across that new one by Claire Brown, which is about, or Claire Waite Brown, which is podcasting 2.0 in practice. That's interesting. That's recently started.
I saw, yeah, I saw she mentioned it on LinkedIn. Somebody commented on her post, and I saw that, and I saw the Pod News weekly review also mentioned it. I do have it on my list. I haven't listened to it, but it's very interesting because podcasting 2.0 is just like this way different, completely different thing, and that's something that you have to like really deep dive into and get an idea of what's going on there because it encompasses so much. So I mean that's great. That's gonna be great. A great way of diving into that topic with a new voice. I wasn't aware of Claire before that. I'm sure obviously she has a background in it, but that's great. That's one way of discovering new shows. It's just by social media and by somebody commenting. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And there's podcasts about podcasts. There's so many out there,
Yeah.
but at the same time, each is different. There's different stories, there's different perspectives, there's different voices. So that's going to be a really good one to check out.
Yeah, Claire's, I've already listened to some of the episodes of it. I'm up to date on it. But it's interesting because initially it's a niche podcast about podcasting because it is about this new thing of podcasting 2.0, which is so it's a whole new thing for all of us in podcasting. Even I'm trying to get my head around what it's all about because it's so different to what we're used to with podcasting. It's like the next level up, essentially. But the interesting thing is that when she's talking about it in the episodes, she's also finding out about this at the same time. Essentially, she's talking to these people because, or they're talking, is because she wants to find out what it's about and doesn't really understand it 100%. So that's what makes that interesting, is because she's coming from another level, the same as we are, where it's, oh, what is this? This lady doesn't know either, but she's finding out exactly the same time as we're finding out, sort of.
And yeah, and that is actually a great way of explaining those sort of topics because I mean you can get to that point where you have two experts talking about whatever topic, and they can get lost in the weeds. So you can way too technical or way too practical, and you're like, wait, like I'm listening to learn. So if you have the host on your side and she's not totally up to date with what's going on, that's great because she might be asking the same questions that you're thinking while you're listening. So it comes from a different point of view, and I think that's great. And that is also one way what we were talking about earlier of defining what your show is and who is it for. So that I think that's a great idea and a great way of making a podcast.
It also highlights something that I like in a lot of podcasts where it is a chat, when it's chat show based. We're not talking audio podcasts because that's completely audio dramas. That's completely different kettle of fish altogether. But this sort of show where you've got people talking with each other about a subject is interesting to me more so when they are coming from different angles, essentially, so that you get a more well-rounded discussion. Say, for instance, a film podcast where people are talking about film. If those three or four heads that are doing that show come at these things from a different point of view, it makes for a more well-rounded, a more interesting, fulfilling show to me personally, anyway.
No, yeah, I agree. It's just a change of the perspective and the way that, and also the way that the information is communicated. Because you might have somebody that again is very technical, is very much by the book, and then you can have somebody that can break it down and be like, all right, this is for the non-experts and for the people that don't know as much. This is what that means, and I think that is a great way, and it just talks a lot about the structure of a show and how you think of it. And that's also one of the things that when people have come for me for help for the shows, one of the things that I ask them is like, how, when you think about it, like when you think about your show, how does it sound? Like, how do you hear it in your mind? Some people have found that question a little bit hard, but what do you mean? It's like when you're imagining, like you have to imagine you making your show and
Yeah.
talking to what your ideal guest. So you have to think about like how it sounds. And thinking about how it sounds can help you with that, because we don't want to get too technical. We don't want to get too into the by the book. We want to make it a little bit more accessible. Or we might have somebody that does that, and then somebody else gives you the an easier version to follow. There's a show actually. Let me give me 1 second. I want to find it. People in podcasting, yeah, by Lower
Yeah.
Street. That does something that's something similar to that, because it's this the two hosts talk to the guest, and then it's I think it's the owner of Lower Street, or the CEO, or somebody higher comes in totally different, and gives his 2 cents. And you're like, what they're talking about here is like explains it a little bit more in a little bit more technical way. And then you go back to the conversation between the two hosts and the guest, which I think is a very cool way also of saying the guy is just giving you like a bird's eye view of the conversation, and it stops. They'll stop the conversation, and he'll jump in and say something, and then they'll jump back into the conversation. I think that's also a very cool way of structuring your show so that it's interesting and it's also communicating as best as possible.
Okay. Thank you for speaking with me today, JP. It's been more fun than I was already expecting it to be. I've really enjoyed this chat with you.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you again. Thank you for having me, and yeah, appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. So where can people find you and get hold of you then, JP?
You can find me on Instagram, Julio Axel Ponce, or sure we'll put that in the show notes because it's a little bit hard. My website, julioaxelponce.com also. And you can find Tropical Podcasting, just go tropicalpodcasting.com if you are a Spanish reader, or if you just want to check it out. You can also go to tropicalpodcasting.com and see the latest. Also Tropical Podcasting on Instagram.
Okay, thank you very much for that. You can find Pods Like Us on all social media, X or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. And we are also on Patreon as well, where we have extra shows for if you just do one, I think it's $1 a month for extra shows and extra bonus features per month. And you can contact us at podslikeus@gmail.com. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening to Pods Like Us, and hope you listen again soon. Take care.